Okay.
You good?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to reconvene the meeting, regular council meeting. PRG Chair Report, Mary Sack's not here, so I assume we're just gonna
Yeah.
table that.
Sorry, Mayor, can I interrupt for just 1 second?
Yep.
The meeting minutes where the ICD was removed and other districts were amended is 2015-1208. So December 8th, 2015.
December 8th, 2015. Okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks. Welcome.
Wait,
What's that?
October,
December.
December
Oh, December.
8th.
December 8th, okay, 12th.
Yeah, and at that time we did,
I wasn't here.
we had done
I remember.
That was the first meeting. I mean, we were sworn in that meeting.
that's right, yeah. No, at that time, we had done a total reorganization of all commercial districts, because we had 7 different conditional districts for Marvin. So
Right.
we had done them all at the same time.
Okay, thank you for that. Next up, okay, so Mary's not here, we'll table that. Next up, we have consent agenda. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Further discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next up, I have, I think we're switching, we're going to unfinished business. 1, consider direction to, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm right. Consider directions to staff for preparing resolution of intent to modify charter for additional council seats and electoral districts. We need to, I think in talking to you earlier today, you mentioned there's a timeline here that we're getting tight on now.
Yeah,
So
I do
hopefully-
have a outline in your agenda as to due dates that kind of back up to when the referendum would take place. I don't
Right.
actually need to have action tonight, but as you see in the agenda packet, I need it here shortly to get the process rolling according to all the different steps that have to take place. My assumption is y'all can make a decision on the number of council members and/or if you're going to have electoral districts, and then we can prepare the resolution of intent to amend the charter, obviously contingent upon the voter referendum outcome. We would still go through the same process that was outlined back in the summer of this past year with the ordinance changes, and then we would make that contingency upon the voter approval.
Okay, so you're asking for us to decide on what then for this?
I need action on if y'all are going to do the electoral districts. What questions basically to ask in the referendum? Does the citizens want to see electoral districts, and/or do they want to see 1 or 2 additional council members? It needs to be yes/no questions, so we need to kind of hone down.
Yes, no votes,
Yes.
because that's what they're going to be voting on. It's going to be hopefully spelled out very simple. Are you okay moving to districts for Marvin? Yes or
So
no?
that's pretty simple, and then we just kind of need a consensus on 1 or 2.
And then do we have to provide a kind of a description of that? Because there's always usually a go-to point in if a bill is coming up and you want to read about it and stuff. Is there anywhere that the community can go and learn more about districts?
We could definitely do something between now and the time of the
Because just saying
educational-
districts, you'd have to explain to them that the district, the person would
Yeah.
run and have to live in that district, it would represent that district, there'd be only, that district would be voting for that particular
Right.
person. Yeah.
Right.
I don't think there's anything per se, like, at the actual voting process, but we could do that leading up to that point.
Yeah. I'm
Right.
saying if you're gonna ask them a question, you
Right.
gotta, so you
Yeah.
know what they're answering.
So I don't have to have action tonight. I mean, we could talk about it again at the work session when Councilmember Epps is here, so everyone's on board, but I do need some direction at that meeting as to the number, and then yes or no on electoral districts.
So you don't want us to just make a motion tonight?
You can, absolutely.
Are we ready?
Unless y'all want Councilmember Epps to be here to
I don't
It's
know.
up to you.
have input into that.
I mean,
We waited from the work session to discuss it.
what's that?
We waited from the work session to discuss it,
We tabled it to,
so we
To
could
this.
have everybody here, yeah, to talk about it,
right,
so.
right.
Okay.
So we can go ahead and,
I'm
so
gonna-
where are we at?
I'm thinking that we should just make the motion, because you're gonna need time to investigate it, correct?
We, We just need time to prepare the resolution, which I have the resolution of intent to amend the charter on May 15th.
Yeah, but if we can do some of this stuff, get it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm backing up right
Yeah,
to the
let's-
exact
yeah,
date,
let's-
so there's some wiggle room in here, but not much.
Right, well, let's just
So
try and move it
I'm
forward.
gonna just make a motion to create a resolution of intent pursuant to NCGS 168, 101 through 103, to change the number of council seats to, I'm gonna say 6 for now, and to elect a new mode of election to consist of electoral districts in the amount of, I think we said 4 before, right?
Yeah.
4 districts.
So before, 4 districts, 1 at-large member and the mayor.
Oh, do I have to put all that down? 1, yeah, 2, 4 districts, 1 at-large member,
Right. And the mayor.
and the mayor,
So you're only saying add one person.
That's,
for now, yeah,
yeah. 5 council people
and the mayor, yeah.
and 4 districts, 1 at-large and the mayor, which is also at-large.
And if I could say just for the record, why? My only real reason right now is, 1, that's already 2 referendum, that's a lot on 1 referendum to consider. And 2, I'm just gonna go with the statistics for towns our size in North Carolina. That's more or less what's driving it. I figure if it's working for 93% of the villages then, or towns, then I would imagine, and there's a good reason.
Further discussion on that? Does anyone have any comments?
I mean, I'd like to see 2 people and no district, but that's
Okay.
my opinion.
Nick?
I'm fine with that. I mean, I like the district idea, and I think, it gives better representation, or, feel like a more local, even to certain districts that they feel like they're not getting the representation. And you still have 1 at-large member, and the mayor would be at-large, so you'd have the whole village voting on them 2 positions.
So really, the whole village is only voting on 2 positions.
Right.
And then, again, do we get into discussion if that seat doesn't get filled? Is there a process or a policy to fill it?
We can decide that all after, I mean, we
After.
can decide that leading up to the point of, it'll be an administrative procedure, and I say administrative as far as y'all are concerned. We'll create that policy, whatever that means.
I mean, we're only adding 1 more seat in actuality, so.
Okay, but you all are comfortable with total 5 seats plus a mayor?
Yeah.
And you preferred 2 seats, right?
Yep.
Where was Robert?
He went back and forth.
was
I saw
fine
some
with
other
either.
minutes that he said 1 or 2, he was back and forth, and then I think he finally settled on districts, from what I remember from the meeting minutes, but
Okay.
I don't want to speak for him.
All right,
Fortunately, he's not here, so we really can't.
Yeah.
right.
And it's not like we're adopting it yet.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
just-
Yeah, we're not adopting.
Yeah, it's almost like for the sake of just moving a little bit forward,
Right.
and then
So we have a motion on the table, further discussion? All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Nay.
Me? Okay, so we have 2 ayes and,
Only because I want more people.
yeah, I agree with that. I think 6 will be good.
I mean, I do want to add people, just for the record, but I
And-
think it should be 2.
I have one more comment when you're done.
Well, I was just gonna talk, as we're talking about this, I was gonna suggest, we had a big, where they came out and got all upset about us, that with the mayor, we were gonna change the charter and have the mayor vote. This is an opportunity to see if we can consider this for the next election too, because they may not be in favor. They may say no to this, but then they may say, because I remember clearly the people who came out who were upset that we were changing the charter, they said, if you're gonna do that, it should be taken to a vote. So this would be an opportunity to possibly say, okay, if we're gonna have the mayor, are you okay with the mayor being allowed to vote? So I'd just like to throw that out there, since it was discussed at length. We had a lot of debate, and we actually went back to saying, okay, we'll just put it on the, I know we talked about putting it on
We did.
the voting, so see where everyone is at with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll take responsibility for starting that whole thing with the mayor voting. That was my own, me that brought that up originally. I mean, if you go back historically, I've never been in favor of the mayor voting and accepting it something. But I have no problem with putting it out for the public to vote on it. If they vote on it and they want it, then I have no problem if that's what they want, But, like I said, normally it wouldn't do that, but I don't have a problem putting it out to the people.
I
People
mean,
vote, yeah.
I'm fine with that too.
Mary?
I'm going to stick with no again, only because, I don't know, like I said, I feel like if the majority of towns are configured this way, I'm going to stick with it for now and see. Too many changes at once feels like it would be too much to throw in to the pot at one time.
I think it's good to hear I mean, I tend to give my opinion regardless if it's asked for or not. It's only the opinion of one, but I mean, I think it's important that we know what our mayors are thinking or where they're at on things. So I'd be, just because, and again, you brought it to me, we put it on the docket, and then it got the community upset, but they were very clear in their message, if you're gonna do that, then put it out as a vote, and that's what I think we're asking just the community, not for us to decide, but the community to decide, so. And
that's part of my thinking is that while I'm against it, I think it's something the community should decide, not us. I mean, if they, if we want to do that, and they feel they want it to be that way, I don't want to take their vote away from them. This is what they want,
So that's just a simple thing, addition on another yes or no question. We could word that probably pretty easy, so.
We would just need someone to make a motion so the resolution of intent, I can prepare it according to Candace's direction.
Okay. Well, I thought I'd throw it out there, so if someone else wants to make the motion, that's fine, or I can make the motion.
I mean, I don't mind doing it. I just
Okay.
don't know if I'm gonna do it right, because I don't.
We'll
I do
figure
it
it
still
out.
pursuant to the same statute, is that right?
It's the same statute.
So pursuant to NCGS 168-101-103, council can amend the village charter to allow the mayor to vote on all items.
And that'd be a yes or no.
Yeah.
Okay, further discussion?
The only question I have there is that if we're doing 6 and then we end up with a tie with the mayor vote, you're gonna have some more stalemates. Or
You
there's a
could.
possibility of stalemates.
You could, yeah, it wouldn't pass, the vote wouldn't pass, which would mean you wouldn't have the majority of the group allowing it. It's a good point, I thought about that too and stuff, but there are gonna be occasions where,
That's why I
what
want
we
7.
discussed. I have issues with, does it become a problem then when the mayor,
That's why I wanted 7.
7 total, 6 and stuff, so. But you could have tiebreakers, which just says that it's
I'm just saying, because
it's
I
not the
think,
majority of it, because you end up getting you're a little more confident as a council if the majority are voting on things, whatever they are. I can tell you, being in the position where you're in a split, and making that decision and stuff is always tough. I mean, so it's
in some ways like I said, even now, the wording is that the mayor may vote in a tie. It doesn't say he has to vote in a tie.
Right.
So, I mean, in a way, it could be a way of forcing council to work together more and say, you guys fight it out, figure out what you're gonna do.
the only thing is, I was thinking that at one point we were talking about how we wanted, the idea that we didn't necessarily always want gridlock, right? Of a majority taking over. So if you've got it situated like that, and you could essentially have the mayor as blocking all progress from continuing, depending on who that is, right? That's just a thought. If they can't break the tie, if you've got 6 members and the mayor isn't voting to break the tie, then you could essentially have a situation where nothing passes for a long amount of time. That's my only concern.
So it would-
Without like movement one or the other. I know it doesn't pass, but there's just, the mayor to me is in that unique position of being that other member so that they hopefully are trying to create consensus and talking to the members. And remember, Nick, we were talking about how for a while you withheld your vote on the mayor pro tem, and that was a unique thing that you could do. You could vote in the event of a tie, but you had the option. And if I remember correctly, the argument you made at the time was, I wanted to see whether the council themselves could work out a solution first.
I mean, part of the thing was that I was elected mayor. The mayor pro tem takes my place if I'm not available, but that should be the council's decision on who they want to do that. Not me, I shouldn't pick the person I want to do that, it's council's, is their mayor pro tem, they're gonna, so that was my feeling, they had to.
And for
Work
me,
it out,
it's,
you know.
it's less about the vote, but that unique position that you could take at the time to say, I can break this tie, but I'm not going to.
You're not obligated to break it down.
Right, and then jump in when you wanted to. It just with that, you don't even have that option with 6 people.
I'm going to make a note that just for the record, that 8:03, Robert, Mr. Councilman Epson's joined us, so we have a full council now. Robert, we're right in the middle of talking about the election referendum that we're going through. So we already have a motion that passed to move the ball along with I think we voted on 5 council members and a mayor, and with districts, 4 districts. So she can get the process going because of where we're at time-wise and backing things up so we can have this in time by the election. So now the proposal was talking about having the mayor, because when Nick had brought it up before, allowing the mayor to vote, there was a lot of backlash from the community. They came out and they said, if you're going to do that, you should just put it to a vote. So while we're doing this, the suggestion is to see if the community wants to allow the mayor to vote or not, in this situation. So that's where we're at.
Where were you at on that, Nick, having served as mayor?
Well, I mean, I was the one who brought it up, in my whatever, but I mean, historically, I've always been against the mayor voting except in a tie, and I still feel that way, but I have no real problem if the public wants to allow it, then I don't have a problem putting it before them and say, do you want the mayor to vote? And again, me personally, I'm not in favor of it, but I see that it hurts us to have the public decide, seeing they said that, if we want to make any ordinance changes, it should go before them, so if we're going to do it, let them decide.
Is it my turn? Have you
It's
spoken?
now.
Yeah.
I guess where I'm at on it is if we're asking the public to decide on additional council members or districts, that's a lot to digest. Let's say they approve it and then we now have what would be a total of 6, right?
Yep.
5 plus 1.
Mhm.
It seems like a good number for the mayor just to have the tie vote, which would only happen if you don't have full quorum. But I think a council of 5 could then decide whether or not they wanted the mayor to vote and change the rules and procedures once there's a full council. So I'm with you, Nick, in that I don't think the mayor needs to vote. We have a big council. But I'd go a step further and say I don't think you need to complicate the vote. Just now you have 5 council members and a mayor. Let them decide if the mayor's going to vote or not. That's where I'm at. And I didn't hear where you were at.
I said my fear is that it would create gridlock, or there's a potential for gridlock if you've got 6 members, because you don't have one appointed person who can break the tie vote. And we had just voted on the 6 members in districts just before that, and that passed, and then before the other issue was brought up.
For me, part of the draw of 5 council plus 1 mayor is that under normal circumstances, there would be no gridlock. Now you throw in the mayor vote, you can quite often have a locked vote.
That's what my concern is, yeah.
So I'm of the mindset that if a future council wants to vote the mayor a vote, so be it. But for the
I see.
for the election,
But you're allowing then the council to make that decision. And what the argument was for everybody who showed up and were upset with it, they're saying, no, you guys should, that's changing a charter. And what they were saying, if you're gonna change a charter, you should allow the community to vote on it rather than, because we went through that whole process. They're saying, we're changing a charter. You guys shouldn't be doing that as a council, but now you're saying you wanna do it as a council.
if there's a new council of 5 and they want to make that decision, that's on them and their relationship with the public. I am of the position I don't want the mayor to vote. It's been that way for 18 years. I'm not interested in
I understand.
I'm not only against it happening now, but I'm against putting it on the vote. I think we're making a good move forward by adding council members and districts. And I think it's complicating things and just actually negating the effect of a 5-council, an uneven number by doing it. So if it's all in one yes or no vote, and people have to decide for the whole lump,
It'll be
We,
broken out.
we could find ourselves in a situation where the community, if we go through, both of these get on the agenda or on the vote, the community says no to 5 people,
Sure.
but then could say yes to things, which then would put us in where you always have, you have a tiebreaker typically. It'd save us money too, $5,000 in stipend, because we wouldn't have to go to 5 councilmen plus a mayor, because we have to add a budget line for that, another stipend, but.
I thought we wanted the number, I thought you agreed we wanted the number of council members higher for better representation.
That's what the district part does,
Well,
and
but also
and
the-
representation too,
Yeah.
Also
yeah.
the number.
I mean, it's either way and however they get there, but again, I was trying to listen to what the community was saying, and it's like, we went forth with changing the charter. They said, no, you shouldn't change the charter, you should allow the people to vote to that, so we agreed to that. And now you're saying for future council, that just the future council change the charter if they want to allow the mayor to vote at that point. That's what
What I
I'm
heard.
hearing.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
If that council wants to make that call, I'm not willing to make that call, because what I heard back from the public wasn't just that that council shouldn't make a decision to give the mayor a vote. It was, we do not want the mayor to vote. We do not want to change the charter for the mayor to vote. It's been that way for 18, 20 years. That's what I heard back. It wasn't just,
I heard different, so, right.
yeah,
That's fine.
and we have different constituents, so that would make sense.
Right. Anyways, I just thought it's a yes or no, and it could potentially happen where they say no to the thing, and then you end up in a situation where you're just asking. And it's not that it even has to be approved. I mean, if the community wants it, and it gets the mayor, I mean, you're not even sure you're gonna get that or not get that vote either way, but you're asking.
I
It's a
just feel
simple
like
yes or no. There's
the mayor
really
should-
3 questions, right? We're at 2.
I'm sorry?
Right now, there's 2 questions right now that we would have, 1
Districts.
Districts.
And 1 council member added.
and 1 council member added.
I just feel like the mayor's role is to run the meetings, build consensus, talk to the different council members before a meeting, just be the team leader, and having a vote just makes him part of the team. It's the coach that goes in the game, and I don't think we need the coach to go into the game unless there's a tie.
It's sort of like that one public comment that we received in October. I hadn't thought about it this way, who said that, who looked at the council members as sort of like Congress, and the mayor is the president, right? Where one can maybe veto, or I guess break the tie, but the others are the legislating members. So do you want the mayor also jumping in on every single legislative decision, I guess is where that comes from? Just a thought.
And just for clarity's sake, the district part, you all want the person that's voting to be voting, to live in the district in which they're voting for the person.
Except for
Yes.
one member.
And then
Yes,
we have
at
1
large.
at large. So there'll be 2, if they're coming to the polls, everybody is voting on the 2.
At
They're
large.
voting for mayor and they're voting for that at-large person.
So,
And then someone in there,
And then
Then some-
the 4 other
Districts.
ones, the way I understand it, are all from however, and it's gonna cost some, I guess, trying to figure out how we separate the districts. What did we estimate that was gonna be?
$4,000.
$4,000, how we did it?
Yeah, and I just wanted to note, I didn't know where y'all were going with this, so for safety standpoint, I did put 2 members in the budget and the electoral mapping, so that is already included in the budget.
Okay.
so let me ask you a question. If they vote for adding a person, no, if they vote for the districts, but they don't vote for adding a person, how do you do that?
Good
Because then you
question.
don't have one at large.
And we've seen.
It's
you-
for the
you
following
experience it,
cycle, yeah.
People get
Yeah.
confused. I could
Right.
totally see them getting confused by
Like,
that.
totally,
Yeah.
yeah.
They got your name mixed with the other person's
Oh,
name,
yeah.
even though it was on 20 million signs.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. But I mean, so if they don't vote for the charter, if they don't vote, sorry, not the charter, if they don't vote for the districts, but yet they vote for the extra person, then how do you,
I think we would just go with the majority.
or
like if-
not
yeah.
that. If you vote for the districts, but not the extra person, then you still have 4 council people. Now you have 4 districts, you don't have an at-large.
Do we
So do we-
actually give them a vote on both, or we just present it as one thing?
Well,
That
that's,
would be too much.
has to
We
be
just
Yeah.
present it as 4
So-
districts and 1 at large and 5 council people.
In fairness,
Yeah.
you're putting this on the ballot for the following, for the 2 years later to actually, because if they say no to it,
yeah,
Right.
but then, yeah, but then
yeah,
they
to
still,
answer Kim's
add-
point, just because I just don't want to, I just want to make sure that we're focusing on what Kim was saying. I think we need to understand, when are those administrative decisions made? Because I can't imagine, I'd like to know what details are on that referendum question, because if the details say 1 at large, 2 at large, blah, 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 she's exactly right. You could end up with it being, that item being approved, and no members to fill those predefined districts.
I think we're gonna have to make sure the ordinance is kind of structured to where it addresses some of these things.
and it's just something I mean,
Yeah. We'll have to work.
I don't
on
know what the
it.
right answer is, I'm just asking the question so we
It's a
think
good
about
point.
it.
And I just wasn't sure how much information's on the referendum question. I thought some of that was administrative from what we talked about last time. So I
It's
don't
probably
know.
gonna be pretty vague, I would assume.
I don't know, because some of those things on the ballots are like
They're
this
really
long,
long,
and I'm
yeah.
like, okay, gotta
But
you know, figure out what they're trying to say.
We want to have one plan that we present to them.
I think you have to
Not
break
a
it
cho-
out.
Not a choice of 5 members, 6 members, 7 members, you know, we have to make a decision on what.
Yeah, we're gonna
Well,
make a
no, I know,
decision.
but
I
I don't
think
think
that-
you can
I think
have
you're right.
like, add a member and districts. I think you have to have add a member, add districts.
And then the districts to
Two
be
separate
defined
questions.
later as a different, that should be like something the council's got to be able to put together later, I think.
Because they could say
We'll
add a
have the
member
districts before
and
we
not
do
add
it.
districts.
No.
There's
We
really
wouldn't do
3
the district
choices,
study
right?
until-
Add a member, add
No,
districts.
until we know, right.
Add a member, no districts. Add districts, not add a member.
Yeah, you
Those
could
are
do it
your,
that way,
those
too.
are the 3 things that are results that are going to come out of that vote.
We'll prepare the resolution of intent to amend the charter, and then we can try to, Millie and I can try to work through some of these issues to figure out how we're gonna address some of these things.
But it's just, I mean,
The outcomes.
yeah.
So do we need to vote on what the items are? Is that where
There
we're
was a
at?
vote.
We
for-
did.
We already did a vote on that.
So we voted on adding 1 person and adding districts.
Because I think we,
Because I thought
remember
we
you
were talking
were
about the mayor
5.
part too.
Yeah,
That
we
was thrown
already,
out after.
yeah.
This is not set in stone yet either. I mean, this is
Right.
Giving
And
them a little direction, but we
and-
could still have more discussion or.
Just so you know, so that we have to go through the resolution of intent to amend the charter.
Sure.
Then we have to make the ordinance to basically amend the charter contingent upon the voter approval. So we'll go through the process as if we're doing it, but that ordinance will be contingent upon, effective date, contingent upon the
Voter
approval
approval.
of the voters.
But we need to have this ready to go to wherever it's got to go by.
Right.
May.
Yeah,
But the direction right now is the ordinance is simply those 2 items.
correct.
Okay. All right.
We
Sorry.
threw out the 3rd one because that was addressed in a previous meeting when we brought up about voting, allowing the mayor to vote, and then again, I don't want to get back into our discussion, but we
Well,
heard 2 different things.
And I voted against 1 in districts. I wanted 2 in no districts. I'm all for adding people, but I wanted more people, just so you know that.
I remember, I think you 2
Yeah.
were on. Yeah.
Yeah, and you were indifferent, I think.
I was good with either.
Yeah.
And the only thing I wanted to add was what I just mentioned, is I did put that in the budget already, so just so y'all know. it's in
So
there.
these 2, because you weren't here, these 2, we went with 5. Because it would have been, so you didn't have to be in that vote, so, no offense. So.
I would have rather been here when we
And,
were.
and I don't care, I just want to throw it out because if we're doing this, that's why, I know it came up, I know we talked about it. And if nobody wants to make a motion on it, I'm fine with that too.
Well, I
Just-
did.
What, oh, you did
I
make a motion?
did.
Okay,
You haven't.
well then let's vote, I didn't realize you did, I'm
I
sorry.
did, that's
You
okay.
made a motion.
I don't think you voted yet.
No,
Okay.
we did not. We were in further discussion
Yeah, for
Okay.
the discussion, right.
What was the motion?
to add the
I'm
mayor
sorry.
to vote to
All
the
matters.
ballot.
Okay,
I'm a no.
all right, so further discussion, all's in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay.
Okay.
I think we need for a little bit more discussion on it, because again, I'm a little bit torn on with the 5, if we do 5.
Six.
Okay.
You know, so right now, I'm a nay.
Okay, all right, the motion doesn't pass. Next
Three,
up,
3 nays and 1 yea?
yep. And let's see. So did you have something else to add to that? You
I
said
just
you were
did
gonna-
the budget, we just went
Okay.
like, was budget.
All right, good. So next up, we have,
Roads.
we were on
New business.
New business.
resurfacing, right?
Yep.
New business, resurfacing.
Roads.
Roads.
Resurfacing.
How did we,
Go, Christine.
when you switch business?
Yeah, they
I was
flipped
all
them.
excited. I
Go,
thought it
Christine.
was
Yeah,
weird.
I know, I
Go.
know. You flipped
Christine,
them,
go.
sorry.
Wow, I came in at just the
Mr.
right
Mayor, you want me
time.
to take over this?
Yes, please.
That's you. So just wanted to bring this back up to council's attention. Back in, I'm trying to remember, the memo pretty much outlines it, but if I recall correctly, it was August. We discussed the road resurfacing for this 4-year plan. In doing some research, I just wanted to clarify that there's never really been a 4-year plan, quote unquote. It's always been a $300,000 year plan, which is equated to a 4-year plan. So,
Wasn't there a time it was a 10-year plan?
yes.
Not officially, we just,
There was a 20
It was a
something.
20-year plan, too.
There was a 20-year plan, okay.
I don't think anyone ever said, hey, let's have a 4-year plan. I think
Ron
someone,
always called it that, I think. Councilman
10-year plan?
Salamayo. So that's why we got this
20-year plan.
impression it was like a set year.
so, doing the limited research that I did do to figure out how we got to this point is basically we were roughly looking at having around $300,000 per year in annual appropriations. What did that get us? Did it get us 6 years? Did it get us 10 years? Engineers came back and said, hey, it gets you 4 years. So we said, yep, let's do it, let's go. However, in looking at that plan, if you look at the attachments that are in your agenda packet, I'm going to tie to the 4-year plan that is an Excel spreadsheet. It basically outlines 10 years from now what a 4-year plan looks like in terms of fund balance appropriation and/or general fund usage and the accumulation of POW bill funds that accrue throughout the years. It's a little bit of a complicated matrix, but basically the POW bill funds you can only accrue up to 5 years of POW bill funds before you have to start sending them back. So with this 4-year plan as proposed by the engineers, I have 2 problems with it. The first problem is that we are accruing a maximum allowable accumulation exceeding the amount that I think we will be able to spend in any given year. And so there comes a point where we potentially will have to send money back if we're not slating it for certain projects. That doesn't come until 2028, which is way down the road, but it is a problem that we need to recognize and try to figure out how we're going to address that. The second issue, and probably the biggest issue for you all, is if you look at the total cost of construction and engineering in this 4-year plan, 2019 is slated at $388. 2020 is slated at $515. 2021 is $535 or $537, and then 2022 is $666,000. So with that being said, we're going to have to pretty much come up with that difference. We have approximately $150,000 in POW bill funds every year. So you take those numbers that I just gave you, minus out $150,000, that's what we have to come up with from a general fund standpoint. We don't have the money in general fund to make that appropriation without going up on taxes for those given years. So,
Well, and I just don't see a need. I mean, I don't have the sheet. Is the sheet on priority in here?
Yeah, it
Oh
looks like
goodness,
it
I'll
is.
never be able to read that.
Mary, will you help me with
Is
this?
that
No,
on?
keep going, Robert.
But
Trying to
the
find
quality's
it.
not great.
It looks like this, Robert.
I'm not sure.
It's under.
No,
Oh,
It's
no,
under
I
new
see it.
business, it's the
Oh, this
first
side.
thing.
I didn't have it in mind. so
Keep going.
So if you flip over to the,
Consensus.
y'all see what it looks like?
Yeah.
Which one? Oh, that one. Oh, we don't have that one in our
I
packet.
just meant
It
the
does.
priority
No, keep
list.
going.
Keep
Keep
flipping,
going,
keep
Robert.
flipping.
keep going,
No, yeah.
Other way.
keep going.
Page 86.
Oh, I
There
see.
you go.
I got it.
So that's the 4-year plan. Look on the back.
It's it's under consent items. It's in my consent item list.
No,
Keep going this way.
what I meant is their score.
Okay, that's the 8-year plan there.
Every road has a
That's the
score.
4-year plan.
86.
Yeah, I know, it looks like 7. It's cut off.
Okay, I got it.
Ah, thank you. I I like fellow PDF users.
So on the proposed 8-year plan,
Yeah.
we actually, one of the flaws the engineer had in the proposal for the $300,000 plan, they didn't account for inflation. And I did remind the council of this in August when we adopted this plan, is we didn't include inflation. And we recognized this year, we had budgeted roughly $308,000 this year. The contract came in at $388,000, so we're already $80,000 over budget for roads this year. We're fine, we don't have to do a budget amendment because we have it in the capital project fund, thank goodness. But I'm just showing you that for an example, that 1 year equates to $80,000 just in this given time of doing it. So we actually increased the amount per mile to account for inflation in this 8-year plan. And if you see, we're only using PAL bill funds.
Which page? Are we still the same one?
86.
Okay.
87, I'm sorry.
87.
We're only using PAL bill funds to fund this 8-year project. So that basically frees up some money to spend on general fund projects in the given year.
So we're really only spending 19, really? In 19, it's 247?
That's the use of general fund.
I know, but I thought it was only 388. Oh, I'm sorry, I got it. So
That's
then the next year, it's 112, and then, basically we're putting that in reserves.
Yes.
And then 112, and then 111, okay.
So this does not, affect the plan that's in this year's agreement because y'all already agreed on those. So I did not include any changes in the proposal that we have for resurfacing for this year.
Okay.
This basically assumes that we will not do construction every year, we would do it every other year. So it helps administratively on letting those contracts and going through that entire process and dealing with the complaints and all that stuff as well, the coordination. So it's not only good on our pocketbook, but it's also good from a staffing standpoint that it's not as big of an administrative burden as what we initially set forth.
Not that we have a road department, or I'm asking you to be the road department, but did we learn anything from the first resurfacing?
We did.
Okay, and are we gonna?
Yes.
To Joe's point, is there money in here for AMT or whoever our engineer is to inspect the day that they?
So what we did not recognize is that we didn't do any inventory on curb and gutter and stormwater and all that stuff. So those numbers in the 4-year plan do not encompass any activity for stormwater, curb and gutter, asphalt repair, any of that stuff. We have included a $30,000 every other year appropriation for just random things that pop up. May not be enough, I don't know. We can move that in.
Is that enough?
But what about
Higher.
supervision or inspection?
I mean, that's in our.
That's in our engineering contract. That would be in our engineering.
Chris, you had something?
So
Well, I
how-
was just gonna say, we've got $40,000 in the operating budget under roads, under transportation for every year for engineering.
But how come they didn't inspect Canterfield?
They did, per DOT standards.
The milling wasn't done.
They did not, there was some issues with the contract. AMT gave the contractor, AMT looked at the contract from DOT. DOT has some standards where they can have some leeway as to what actually is done at the point of the construction. And so for whatever reason, they didn't do it. DOT was okay with it because they said it wasn't needed.
So was AMT at Canterfield? Because I didn't see them. I drove by, I was school pickup.
They weren't out there every day. They were out there some, but I don't know to the extent of how much.
That's the one takeaway I would say is, instead of AMT cruising around
Yeah, the 4 hours.
my property when nothing's going on, they should be in Canterfield or wherever the roads are being done to make sure they're done properly.
Supposedly DOT, it's DOT projects, so supposedly DOT had an engineer on site at all times doing quality checks.
Well, the
That's what
irony
I've been
is,
told.
during the roundabouts, which is a DOT project, AMT was parked out there with 1 to 2 trucks every single day.
Was that on our bill?
Wasn't on our bill,
I
but
was gonna say, that wasn't on.
we can call it a DOT project, and AMT wouldn't have any input, but either DOT hired them or someone did, because they were out there every single day parked right on the Village Hall property. In the meantime, when Canterville was being done, and I don't have a dog in the race as far as roads, we have private roads, but I got emails about the lack of milling. I forwarded them to you. And to me, that was, if we're talking about learning, to me, as a builder, if someone's not supervising, things happen. And the person doing the work isn't the supervisor, or things happen. So,
I need to make a separate note, because there was all kinds of things go floating around about Canterfield being the top of the list, and that somehow that was purposeful. Obviously, I wasn't elected at that point. The irony is, I was one of the few people who said, I don't want Canterfield to be first, because I want all the kinks to be worked out first in the system before they do Canterfield's roads. And it's unfortunate that, to your point, you know, we did a lot of the learning in that subdivision, I think.
So you can like work on the contract too, now that you know what needs to actually be in there, correct?
Yeah, well, the contract is the contract according to DOT. There's not a whole lot we can do to change it. It's a DOT contract. So I have communicated with
but
AMT.
just to be clear, milling was in the contract. Okay, because I feel like we keep skipping over that. I want to be clear with you, milling was in the contract,
I think it was a 1/2-inch profile mill in Canterville.
which we paid for, but they didn't do, and
Did we get a
We
credit?
did not pay for it. We were only billed actual costs, and the contractor, so DOT.
but it was in the contract.
It was in our contract with DOT. It was not in the contract with DOT and the subletting contract.
And that's why I'm focused on, if we need a little money, but it's not, Chris said we have 40 grand in there for professional services. If that's not sufficient, I don't want emails from Fire Authority that, hey, they didn't mill around the manholes. Because that would drive me nuts. If I'm driving up and down that main road
Right.
and there's a hole because they didn't mill it in and tuck it in up to the manholes, that would bother me driving there 5 times a day or however many times you all go in there. So my expectation is if we're paying this kind of money, especially at the new inflated rate, that somebody on our end, some advocate for us, for the village, is inspecting while in process. After it does no good, because we're not going to ask them to go back and regrind a new surface, much like Canterville.
Just for the record, I don't see any profile milling in the contract for Firethorn, just FYI. It's all overlay, inch and a
No,
quarter.
Joe, you guys need,
No, I actually talked to the inspector there, when I saw him marking up the roads, I specifically asked that question.
Are they gonna profile mill?
That's what
Okay.
he said. Now,
otherwise you're going to get bumps.
I know we are. I mean, that's exactly where I'm concerned about, though. Why are we doing it if we're just overlaying? It's gonna create an issue, and there's a lot of people ride bikes in that area.
Well, so we did table the resolution and the agreement for DOT, so if y'all don't mind making sure you look through that agreement, the exhibit that's in the agreement, because it outlines specifically what the construction is to be. So if we need to change it, we need to let them know. But they're doing this based on the engineer's assessment and road conditions. So I don't see a
Yeah, that was an
profile mill.
engineer I talked to that said, yeah, they'll be milling down where, because the guy asked him specifically, you're gonna grind down, so when you do the overlay, we have an even surface. And he said, yes.
Yeah, I don't see that in here, but I can ask AMT, but I don't see specifically
Just
profile
doing an
mill.
Let's ask that
overlay just
question.
is not.
And that was part of the
That's not
engineering
fixing
program
the
back in
road.
the spring, right?
Correct,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not, and it's not really fixing a road, it's just putting a Band-Aid on it, like they,
But I do want to go back to your point, because one of the problems that we found was, yes, in the agreement that we have with DOT, it said profile mill, and I'm just going to make this number up, $15,000 for Canterville Creek. When we went back and researched what had happened and why it wasn't done, I actually looked at the contract with DOT and that contractor who did it, and that profile mill wasn't in there, so therefore it wasn't billed, so we didn't actually pay for the amount that was actually for the profile mill.
So my only problem with that is, if you're building a house, but you don't specify that you're putting shingles on it, and then you tell the customer at the end, well, you know, you didn't pay for it, so it's okay. That doesn't
I
fly.
understand.
When we spend that kind of money with AMT on a monthly basis, and we have minimums, right? My expectation is that we as a council can say, we want black, pretty roads that taper off from the center and tuck into the gutter and around manholes. What needs to be in that contract for that to happen? You're asking me to go back, and I'm not singling you out, but you're asking me to read the contract that AMT has been paid to read and to give us advice on. We're not in the road business. We hire a professional to cover our backs.
Correct.
That's what I want out of that profession.
And I completely understand, and to my defense, I'm not an engineer either, so I can only go by what they say we need to do. So if there's something that someone feels, as i.e. profile milling, needs to take place, then we need to tell them that, because from the engineer standpoint, I'm only going by what they say needs to take place and happen.
I would describe it like Robert did. We want black, pretty streets that are flat, they taper off, they tell, I mean, literally
So
tell
moved.
AMT
Dumb it
that,
down,
and however they need to word that, they need to word that. Cause I don't know what the
just-
wording is.
Again,
Like you say
I
profile
don't
mill,
know,
I
I
have no
don't
idea
know
what
much,
you're talking about.
but simple overlay on what's not necessarily been milled and stuff, you're not really improving it. They're getting away with turning over the roads to us when we had to do it before, and the DOT, when they were owned by still owned by the homeowners of our neighborhood. I won't say it. I've already probably
You can
got it,
pass
Candy.
on that
It's
one.
okay, yeah.
But anyways, we specifically, they said, oh, no, you don't get to turn them over until you bring them up to our standards.
Right.
So we had to do everything, and it cost us $170,000 in our neighborhood to get it up to their standards. So why is it different now that they can just come back and just say, oh, we're just gonna put an overlay, and then we hand them over to Marvin, and then Marvin really is stuck with the real problem down the road.
Especially when it's gonna
So-
cost a whole bunch of money.
So here's what I'm thinking. Do we have, in the contract with AMT, do we delineate what we would like them to govern or what their responsibilities are?
We do.
We do? Is the oversight over road construction and standards and resurfacing in that contract?
I'm sure that it is, but we also have a standards and spec manual that ties back to NCDOT standards.
Okay.
And I think we can all agree that NCDOT is about functionality and not maybe about aesthetics, because they're dealing with high-level quality roads that, you see tons of traffic through. So if we're talking about the standards in residential neighborhoods, maybe we have a higher standard in those neighborhoods, and we should, so maybe we need to think about changing our specs.
Aesthetics
like-
to me are pretty. Bumps or defects.
Correct.
I just like to
So-
turn our complaints into an action of some kind if we can. So I'm just wondering, what do we need to do to the contract to be sure that we're getting the results that we're looking for?
I think we need
To Robert's
tell
point, it's
AMT
just
that.
tell AMT, it's AMT's job to understand that
Well, see, the aesthetics, if I'm hearing correctly from what Christina's saying is, and what you all are saying is, they're the engineers, so they're gonna come at it from the perspective of, and I bet you their contract says this, does it meet technical specs?
Right.
And they're gonna check the box.
That's
But
correct.
if we want them to do something more than that, then we should make a motion to direct that action and put it in their contract.
So there's a section in the agreement that says phases of work, and it says the department shall be responsible for planning, design, construction, and contract administration. All work shall be done in accordance with the developmental standards, policies, and procedures, which is NCDOT standards and procedures. So if there are other standards and procedures that we need to adhere to, we need to include that into this agreement, and we need to cite what those are.
Read that again, that last part.
All work shall be done in accordance with the departmental standards, policies, and procedures. The departmental as in DOT.
So we have our own road manual. That's not factored in there somehow?
We do this standards and spec manual that ties back to NCDOT standards. So yes, we do, but it's NCDOT.
Yeah, I'm just, so if I had to shoot the things out, I'd say, one, I would want that contract to reflect our manual specifically, because I know for sure, having worked on that there's some things that we have in there that the NCDOT manual does not have. So we wanted to point to that, and I think we also want to be sure that when we say administrate a contract, not only are we looking for them to be sure that they meet NCDOT standards, standards in the Marvin Road Manual, and I don't know, how do we word the rest of it, that it looks pretty. That, I don't know, aesthetic values of the
This has
village.
nothing to do with you. I'm trying to be clear on that. What I'm having a hard time grasping is simply that in the budget, there is not supervision by MT, but I'm hearing there is, but it didn't happen in Canterfield. So that I'm hearing that it's not in our contract now. It's not supposed to be that difficult for us. When we hired them, and if you add up the numbers, I'm betting there's tens of thousands of dollars in developing our standards, putting together a contract, The work we give to them just as minimums, the 4 hours, whatever it is a week, that we pay just for the pleasure of having them work with us. All that money we spend, and we've got a road in the first one we have where you can walk down a curb and trip over it. Okay, and I get it could be within standards. So it's not our job to go through these standards. It's our job to be high level and say, look, we want roads we can be proud of, roads you don't trip over, and roads your car doesn't go thump. It's pretty simple. And if they can't turn that into specs without hiding behind DOT standards, then maybe we need to look at someone else that is willing to dig a little deeper and get us standards and contracts that will produce a product that we can be proud of.
Okay,
I'm
so,
not trying to reinvent the wheel here.
and I know, I'm trying to put this into a concept of action, of an action plan. So I think what I'm hearing is we need to get AMT to review our current standards and spec manual to see if it's exactly what DOT standards are, or if there's a way we can amend it to make it a little bit more to our pleasing. And if so, let's go ahead and get them to do that so we can put this agreement as a part of those standards. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would say I would say absolutely that contract, it can reference NCDOT, but it must also reference our road manual.
Okay.
And we can amend our road manual at any point without them even looking at it, right? To include some of the things that Robert's talking about.
Okay,
and Kim's
so
talking about.
Do they need to come to a meeting? Because
That would be awesome if we could do that and get some clarity.
Why
Are
don't
you-
we have them come to the work session?
But
I just want one of them to look me in the face and tell me why I can't say I need smooth roads. They should be at least as smooth as they were when they
Before?
got
When
there.
it started, yeah, just adding something on it to,
Yeah.
and I'm
You
going,
get-
I'm
you
gonna
get what
go
I'm
back.
It's like they undulate.
yeah,
And
I understand what you're saying.
I'm gonna go back to your point that how did we miss and whose responsibility was it? It says we were gonna get the milling. That's what we agreed to, but somehow by the time DOT assigns the actual contractor, the milling is a skip, but you're not gonna get charged for it. That's not the deal we signed up for, because we signed up for taking over the roads so they would last how many years?
That's right.
20 years. And that's just it's called sloughing, I believe, and I don't even know the road business that well. It's gonna slough off and you're gonna have problems with that. So all it is just gonna come back right around. What I'm trying to do is avoid having an engineer that can talk to us and tell us, assure us that we're gonna get that, but also avoiding a whole roads department in the city of
Correct.
Village of Marvin, because we don't have the budget for that. We rely on them to understand that. And the fact that that got missed, and now it's turned over to us, and is it really 20 years before we're gonna be back in?
And I don't
doubt
I don't know the answer to that question. Unfortunately, I came in on the very tail end of this.
I know, I understand.
And Chris was there in the meeting with AMT when we talked about this, and I think they were caught off guard by the fact that I brought up that it wasn't in the contract with DOT, but yet it's in our contract. So I don't think it's gonna happen again, and I'm gonna make sure that I review that contract.
So this time,
if
they
I
just
can.
removed it from the contract, but I'm saying, then this is just verbal
Oh,
with
right.
the DOT. They're saying, oh yeah, we're gonna do that, but now I'm hearing it's not in the contract.
Well, in all fairness
Well, not in the
though,
Firethorn one.
if it wasn't on, if it wasn't in our table of requirements, right? And this was the one I looked at, I remember this is the first meeting in July or whatever, and I looked at that table and I didn't even know what it meant. What you're saying is that the lack of a milling requirement was actually in the plan that the council approved in May.
I can't tell you that
Right?
for sure because that is
The
a
one for
criteria-based pavement condition study. And there's I don't think it actually specifies if a profile mill was a requirement. It just gives you the criteria of establishing the score for the road.
Okay,
I don't
sorry,
think
thought
it
that-
prescribes the action that's needed for said road. Does that make sense? It
Yeah,
gives
then
you-
how
it
do
gives
they
you the
create the
score.
contract and delineate what their scope of work is?
I think that's where the individuals come out, like the ones that you're talking about, they come out and see what areas are needed. If there's alligator cracking, it may have to have patchwork.
Who's they? Just like-
It's some of the
They're
contractors. that-
inspectors, DOTs,
With
that's what he
DOT.
said he was. And he was
Oh.
probably gonna be the one on the job while this whole thing was going down, but
Yeah,
that's
see, that's a
DOT.
problem.
It's
Yeah.
it's not the middleman that we want in there. Yeah.
So do you
So
want, do y'all,
we need our engineers, what I think I'm hearing, because you can't do all this, when it says administrate the contract, we really want to give the engineers, I think, ownership, right? Of what it is the village council wants to see and what it is and the oversight directives that they need over NCDOT's contract, right? Because it's a private contract with NCDOT. It's not like we're paying them to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you just said more thoroughly what I was saying in the beginning. If we're gonna go into Firethorn or Beechwood or any of these subdivisions and do a road, I wanna know that our engineer is doing a drive-by. And for the last year or so, however long they've had the contract, they've driven through subdivisions 4 hours a week minimum when nothing's going on. And that just upsets me. In the meantime, Canterfield had their roads being done, and I don't know, but from what I'm hearing, I believe that AMT never went in there. But they were right down the road in my subdivision with nothing going on, parked, and that upsets me.
So what I'll do is sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, let's just get them in here.
Yes,
Does the work session work for everybody since
Sure.
it's during the day?
Yep.
So I'll bring them to the next work session, but I do need some clarity on if y'all want them to go ahead and review these standards to
Yes.
see
Yeah.
before the meeting.
They,
because-
Oh, yeah.
Let's do the legwork beforehand and then we can have a
Okay.
So
frank
they have answers,
conversation.
hopefully.
Because if that's the case, we need to go ahead and change that, and I need to let DOT know that we're not okay with this agreement as it's presented,
Yeah.
and that we need to include some language in that phases of work section.
And just give them the example we just cited.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Do you need a
as fair as
motion
you
for
can
that?
be.
No, I've
Um,
got clarity. I mean, with
Unanimous
this,
consent, I think. Yeah.
but
Um,
If
in-
there's a reason they can't produce the product that we want, explain it. You can prep them in advance. Look, all Robert cares about is if you say it's absolutely impossible to get Firethorn the same pitch, the same smoothness that they have now, but make it last 20 more years, tell me why. That's all I want to know.
I understand. In all totalness, we basically are looking for increased standards of our roads,
Yeah.
basically, after the resurface.
Well,
And we
and
need
that's
to
why
know.
our road manual is important, because if I remember correctly, we bumped up the standards in our road manual,
Okay.
right?
Did AMT do that?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they pulled it from Waxaw. We said,
Okay.
don't
Yeah.
rewrite the book. Don't
Okay.
spend a lot of time on this. Use Waxaws.
So,
Well, we did add a few things, but
maybe, yeah.
still, for the most part, they were definitely involved in it, and I guess this is what I'm having trouble with. They talked us into maintenance of roads for a long time. Why? Because they felt we, as a municipality, could take better care of the roads, and when it came to resurfacing, do it at a level that was higher than the state could provide for longevity's sake, and now they're like saying, oh, we missed a thing. You
well,
know?
and
I
they
don't get
very
it.
well could be, but the agreement that we had last year and the agreement that we have proposed in front of us
Mhm.
today is to DOT standards. So ours
Yeah.
very well could supersede it,
That's-
but if we're signing an agreement that says we're gonna do it to your standards or your standards, we go with the standards that we're signing up to.
I want the standards that when I'm taking this road over as a village, I want the standards that they pitch, the 20-year standard. What is it gonna take to have a 20-year
Yeah,
road? Because that's what we
they
are,
pitched.
Yeah.
that's what this whole agreement is of receiving Powell bill funds and taking over roads.
Okay.
Why would we take over a lemon? Put it up to your own standards, but your own standards say that it's 20 years. But
Furthermore.
I'm gonna make a bet right now, we'll be in Canterfield before 20 years.
Underwood used to be the District 10 manager for NCDOT. I went to work for AMT, which is one of the main reasons we signed a contract with them. And so Underwood was instrumental in providing and constructing our own village road standards. So with that in mind, it feels to me like he really was supposed to be the bridge between what the village wants and what NCDOT is going to do. I was just going to say though, they're coming to a meeting, that's what we're gonna do, and we're gonna talk to them about the road standards.
No, we're looking at 20-year road standards.
Oh,
But
that's what I was gonna do.
That's not the overlay portions.
It would be to bringing them to 20-year standards, period, whatever that means, I would assume.
Because I know we had met with, maybe it was Underwood at the time we went out with him.
We drove around with
And he
Underwood.
told us, I mean, we were talking about overlay, and he said, oh, it's more like 7 years. You know,
Well, then the engineer shouldn't have done the condition study and proposal.
Why would we take over roads if we're just buying in for 7 years. I mean,
That might have been
Exactly.
one of the, remember he talked to us about basically 3 different
Yeah,
products?
things, and but he said that, you know, I forget how he put it, you know,
No, you're right, he did.
Yeah, I mean, it was 7 years, but, you know, you'd have to figure out if it was worth it, if you'd have to do it twice or in that same period. If the 20-year cost was more than double the 7-year cost, or whatever.
It had something to do with the milling, actually,
Yeah.
and the thickness,
Right.
and, because when you tuck it in, it's just common sense. Like Joe said, when it's not tucked in, it breaks apart. There was a word you used, but,
Slough.
yeah, it's gonna break apart and it's not gonna last. So I thought the way we left it with Underwood was, what he was explaining to us was that if you do it the right way, you can squeeze 10 to 20 years out of it. If you do it halfway, you're only gonna get 7 years tops.
So we may want to look at our condition study or our recommendation anyways. Are y'all, is there a consensus, everyone is okay moving away from this 4-year plan?
Yeah, go with
Yes.
the 8-year
Yes.
plan.
Yes.
it's a 8 year.
Yeah, we need to manage our money properly.
Yeah.
I was just gonna, I remembered what I was gonna say before. Could we ask the planner to look at our road standards, our manual,
I said that
and
was a good
compare
quote.
it
We
to
need to manage
what
our money properly.
they're offering in the contract, so we can find out?
I was gonna suggest it myself if you didn't say anything.
Yeah, and you're just going to be looking at DOT standards, so.
Okay.
And I would be remiss
If everyone's okay with that.
if I didn't say that this potentially may increase the cost of the contract as proposed. If we're increasing our standards and they have to, change some things, potentially, I don't know. but I
Just remind them they are their roads. We're taking them over,
so-
where they never have to deal
Joe
with it
touched on it
again.
earlier, we thought we were signing up for road standards that were at least
Yeah,
equal to what a new subdivision would look like now. For instance, what's the preserve?
preserve.
You drive down there, it's a nice road. And that's what our expectation was. That's what we thought we were signing up for. That's what we thought Underwood was presenting to us, supporting. These are the questions we asked. We had a dozen meetings with the guy, right?
I know.
Before we made the decision to get into this.
Okay.
And I'm not rethinking it. I don't know about everyone else. I'm not rethinking it. I just want to know that we're getting what we're paying for. And we can assure that by proper supervision
Right.
and contract management.
So I'll try to get a list of questions to get answered from AMT at the work session. Maybe they can do a little presentation. And if y'all have any direct questions that you want me to get addressed other than what's been discussed.
The only thing that I remember coming up to, and it was complaints from some of the neighbors in Canterfield, was the notification timeframe. I
We
think
did
was
talk
very
about
poorly
that.
executed, where people all of a sudden they showed up and stuff, so they've got to be able to figure out, like, okay, it's coming within the next couple of days, but all of a sudden it came down on them, so it was this thing. But, I mean, didn't mean to stir up a lot of things, but I think it's a question that needs to be asked as far as what did we learn, because we're in the road business
Yeah,
now.
absolutely.
And we got to own this, and we got to be able to say, yeah, we took over the roads, and I don't want to be able to say that, well, they don't look great. I mean, we're not road people. We have to rely on these guys, so.
So, since we had a previous motion taken in the August meeting to go with this 4-year plan, if someone doesn't mind making a motion to move towards an 8-year plan, and staff will present whatever that means at a later date, but the intent is for us to get rid of this 4-year plan. So
And that helps
we
with
can-
the budget that we just looked
Correct.
at
I have
earlier.
it drafted, so I may as well do it.
Okay.
Motion to revise Marvin Street resurfacing program to reflect an 8-year road maintenance and adoption plan.
Further discussion? All those in favor? Motion
Aye.
passes. Anything else on resurfacing? Good to go? Okay. Next up, I have discussion consideration of audit contract.
So there's a proposal that's in your agenda packet. Basically, our auditor is going up roughly $9,000, and Chris, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but it's roughly $9,000 next year for the audit, so we have a couple of options for you to entertain. We have put in the budget for the increased amount and been able to balance that budget effectively. However, there's a second option council may want to consider, and I don't know the amount for this, but our finance officer can prepare the internal financial statements and actually take that away from the auditor they actually can't audit their work anyway, so they actually have to send the internal financial statements off to a second portion of their firm to do that part. And if we take that away from the auditor and keep it in-house, we could potentially reduce some of the direct costs. We will have an increased cost with, additional hours that she would need to do so, but her work would be audited still from the auditor in that process. But our audit contract would remain the same as it stands in this year, maybe initial $1,000 or $2,000.
And do you have the hours for that, time for that?
I mean, we make the time. I mean, honestly, I don't know what it would take. Right now, I know that it takes the auditor a lot of time because they do a lot of mapping. Now, she's, when I had a conversation with them about whether we could do that, she said she'd be willing to share like her spreadsheets and things like that with me to work on. And some of it we've done already when we revised the budget. So honestly, like Christine said, I'm not sure what the time would be involved, but I mean, I'd be willing to.
I'm saying, do you have the time? 'Cause
She
you-
doesn't have it in her normal, we would have
Right,
to increase her
but
hours.
meaning that, or do you want
I'd have to
additional
make
hours?
I'd have to make the time.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd have to make the time.
The contract now has it worked in though?
Say that one more
The
time.
contract that has that oversight or that,
The current one.
Has it worked
The current
in?
one does, and the current budget that we have has that amount in there for them to do everything.
okay.
But the option is, there's a couple of different options to let a third-party firm do the same thing. I don't know how much that's gonna be. We actually tried to call a couple of them Monday and Friday, and they wouldn't give us any answers.
And what's it called?
Most of them are in the middle of tax season.
Internal service, or internal financial statements.
Nick had a question. Were you gonna ask something?
I think we could probably reduce the cost by doing it in-house slightly. I just don't know how much.
I mean, is that, it seemed to me, is that okay? Can Chris do that? I mean,
She can.
because, I mean, the audit was, I thought theoretically was supposed to be from outside the village, auditing the village.
Well, so usually what
Usually
happens,
happens
Nick,
in-house.
is in a bigger office, like a bigger organization with more staff, they have a financial reporting department and they actually create the financial statements. And then the auditor just comes in and audits them. Because we've been so small and we don't have staff, and for a lot of years we didn't have staff who were qualified to do it, our auditor has always done our own financial statements. And that happens a lot in small municipalities, and the LGC recognizes that. They're just, the LGC is implementing some new requirements which are making it stricter on the auditors. So they're, as far as, because they don't want them to audit their own financial statements. Does that make sense? Like if they create our financial statements for us and they do the audit, they're finding that that line is getting blurred a little bit.
But if you create the financial statement, they still have to audit what you created.
Yes, then they would do the audit, but their audit is basically testing. It's, looking at the bank reconciliations, it's doing a selection of vendor bills that we paid and making sure that they were valid and that, different things like that. So they would still do the audit work, whereas right now they do both parts. And I think, to follow up on what Christina said, I mean, I think I could probably do a lot of the initial work to get the financial, we might be able to meet somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I'm just concerned legally that we can do that, it's
Yeah.
not
Oh,
gonna come
definitely.
back on us somehow.
Yeah, it's even better if we do it.
Okay.
So we just need direction as to what option y'all prefer. We could go out to bid on it. It's not something that I would recommend this
Why
year.
not? I mean, $9,000's a huge jump.
Because it's gonna take a lot of time for staff to prepare the RFQ, to go out to
Does
bid.
it have to go up? What is the limit on the contract before it has to go out to bid?
Usually we do it for all
services.
Well, it would have to follow our purchasing policy. So we generally would get 3.
So do we,
It's
would you
just
go out to
internal
bid?
policy.
So it's not it's
Would
not
we
a request
RFQ?
for bid, it's
We could do like an.
It would be an informal bid.
Okay.
$9,000 is, what's the contract?
Yeah, what's the size of the?
17.
17.
17.4.
Yeah, so it would
So
be
it's
under
a
informal. I think
over
it's
a
either
50%
50 or
increase.
1,000 is the limit.
But, one of the things,
You
Yeah.
can't do it based on price, you have to do it on qualifications,
Yeah.
it's an RFQ, so you can't
So
shop,
You couldn't get
you
pricing.
see that, yeah, you're not,
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
not a
best
statute,
price.
it's not governed by statute that.
But if they all have the same, if they all have the same certifications, whatever the qualifications are, what do you mean we couldn't then do it by price?
The statute specifically says you can't ask price on qualifications. I don't know the exact language, but there's some language in it with like engineers and architects.
Right,
that
this
you
is a
can't
service
actually-
contract, so I don't think it falls under that.
No.
So we wouldn't have to RFQ it then. So we could just go out for pricing.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
only governed by an internal policy
Okay.
if we have one. And if last I read of our purchasing policy that's in effect,
didn't.
we didn't have
Okay.
that requirement.
So then we could,
Well, the beauty of accountants and CPAs is, for the most part, the facts are what they are. And as long as they have the qualifications, I would expect we'd end up with the same product. Now, I'm not against what you're suggesting that Chris do as preliminary work to save money. In either case, let's say you get a price that comes back at 17, this year's contract, but it might be 12 if she did the preliminary financial statements. I mean, I'd be for that. Anyways, I mean, obviously, we're saving money.
Wouldn't it be 10 if she did the preliminary financial statements?
that's,
Well,
yeah, yes,
But
with the
also,
current,
what Christina pointed out is, but my hours then would have to
would have to go
increase.
up, so we don't know
Right,
that.
but if
Since
Robert
I'm
said,
hourly.
if we find somebody at 12 and Chris is still doing the financial statements, it's gonna be more than that. Is that how, did I
Are
misunderstand you?
you assuming the internal financial statements would be done by said contractor or?
My thought is right now, apples to apples, this contract, not the new contract, because it sounds like they go up $9,000.
Correct.
So whatever the current contract is at 17, whatever's in that contract, that's what I would recommend, that's what I would suggest, that we get more pricing on.
Okay.
Because a 50-60% jump is ridiculous. The second part, separate part, is if you all felt there was a savings to the village to have Chris, let's say you have a new contractor, do preliminary financial statements for the new auditor, and there's a savings, a net savings, between her hours and what the contractor would charge, I'm for that as well, but I consider them two different things. Right now, we have a contractor jumping up $9,000 in 1 year, that's a lot.
Chris, why did it go up so much?
Well, when I talked to her, there were a lot of different reasons. Some of it was all the different issues that we had last year with the budget not being passed and things like that. There's also, I mean, they actually had $23,000 into the audit last year, and they billed us $9,000. So they had a lot more time. Some of it was the amount of time it took to get some of the things, the documentation back that they needed. There was a lot of follow-up that they had regarding some of the documents they were getting from council. That took extra time. We also identified some things during the audit that in prior years, like a long time ago, hadn't been done correctly, and so those things had to be corrected. And then a lot of it was because of the effort that it takes them to get from QuickBooks, which is a non-governmental accounting system, but works for us because we can't afford a governmental accounting system, to what the City of Dogwood standard financial statements are. And
And
there's
that-
just a lot of cross-mapping that has to go on.
And that's one of the reasons that we tried to restructure the way we've done our budget format this year, is we've tried to make it more uniform with other governments so the audit process is easier, and they're not going back and trying to add these numbers up and these columns up to reflect what a normal operating budget looks like. So we've hopefully addressed some of those things that have taken a lot of time this year, and hopefully we won't have that problem again. But Chris, can I ask the question, if we go ahead and do some type of informal quote process, do we have time to do that and then bring it back to them to say, here's the options, and/or have your piece in there as well, so that they can,
Oh, gosh. I don't know, because the budget
before we
has to be-
start?
Well, the budget has to be passed by May 14th. Before the audit, definitely.
Yes.
Before May 14th, I'm just not sure how long.
Oh, can we do a
Well,
budget amendment at
we
that
can
point?
try.
Yeah, we could keep it in the budget as it stands
Yes.
now, if council, adopts the budget as such, and then we could see if we can get it reduced, and if, if we can, we'll just do a budget amendment and appropriate that somewhere else, or to put it back in fund
Right.
balance.
How much was the auditor the year before we switched to this company?
Um,
I thought it was like 8 or 9.
It was, and that was another thing I was gonna say. I mean, Christina and I talked about this a lot, and I did some research where you can go on the LGC website and see what last year's audit fees were for different municipalities across the whole state. And yes, our audit fees were less last year. We also got a lot different level of service than we got this year. The auditors this year are a lot more knowledgeable and responsive regarding municipal financial statements and audits. And so that's some of the reason why we found some things that hadn't been done correctly in the past, because our auditor didn't identify those things. So I feel like from a village perspective, we got somebody who was a better fit for us.
But what did it do for us? Are we able to borrow more money, or did they find that
just
staff
have
had
more
done something
reliable-
wrong? I mean, what did we get out of the audit that was justified going from 9 grand roughly to 17 grand, and now another 9 grand jump? What's the value to the village? What are we getting out of it? I get they're good, but what are we getting?
You're getting, I guess, more reliable financial statements, and it's also the process that staff goes through with the auditors is just a easier process.
It
as
it was a
far as
lot
that goes.
smaller company too last time, and they were getting out of, weren't they the
No,
last auditors
We
getting
had
out?
several auditors, because we had the one auditor who got out of municipal government auditing because they said they didn't want to go through all the training they had to do.
Right.
So they were getting out of it completely. So then we went back to another auditor because we were kind of in a short time frame. So we went back to the previous bids that we had, and we went to this person who had given us the second choice when I
Okay.
looked back through the documentation. That was before I was here. And so that was an independent, one of the reasons why the fees were so low was because that was just one person who was independent and didn't have an office behind her.
I think consistency.
But it
would be
worked
the
for
answer.
us we've been doing audits for 18 years.
Oh, we've had big firms before.
At 17 and 20, whatever that is, 26 grand?
No, it's not 17 and 26, it's went from
17's the
9
new
to
contract
17.
price.
I thought the contract we have now is 17.
No, it's
11.
It's 11,
So it's
No,
going up to,
9.
it's 9 and it's
Sorry,
going up to
9,
17.
but he wants to go to 17.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because they last year spent supposedly $23,000, so they lost money on us.
And from my perspective, bottom line is we need to look at our other options. That's too much of an increase.
Staff can go out and reach out and get some informal
And that's
quotes.
the person
You
who-
just said there's a list on the LGC.
Yes, and I've looked at that already. I mean, here's the other thing, there's not a lot of firms in our area. The firm we used last year actually merged with one of the other firms, so that reduced it by one. Yeah, I looked at like Concord, Matthews, Charlotte, Monroe. There's not a whole lot of firms, but we can reach out to all of them and ask.
I mean,
I don't think it hurts.
it doesn't hurt.
No.
It's kind of our responsibility.
Right.
So what we'll do then, if there's a consensus to do that, we'll keep the amount in the budget as it stands, just for, consistency's sake with budget discussions, and then we'll keep searching, and
Okay.
hopefully we'll have some answers before we're actually approved. If not, we'll come back and do a budget amendment,
Okay.
decrease or increase. Does that sound okay?
So what motion need you make? It's
We
just
don't have to increase
direction.
it, right? 'Cause we already have.
I mean, hopefully,
We don't.
yeah.
Because if we get higher bids and this or quotes,
Is there a
then we won't
time-
change it.
Well, is there a timeline on acceptance of proposal? Because that would
No.
answer that question.
No, but one of the risks we'll run is something that another municipality I talked to ran into last year, which is a lot of the firms kind of, whether they want to take on a new audit.
Okay.
Because a new audit for a firm takes a lot of extra time as well. And so one of the things that happens is they spend a lot more time in the first year, and then in the next year, they kind of make up some of that because they're now familiar with the record and everything. But we can try.
Am I hearing there's a consensus to go out?
I think there's a consensus. I don't think we need to take a vote, do we?
No, as
Just
long as,
direction.
I'm
Okay.
just gonna ask, actually, maybe Barbie, if you don't mind, when there is unanimous consent, maybe we can mark that though in the minutes?
Minutes?
Just so that we're sure that we made an action and we all agreed. Thank you, if you don't mind.
Unless it's
Just
easy
to be
for
sure.
you, for us to make a motion, whatever you need.
No, I can do that.
Okay. All right, thank you. Think we're done there? Okay, so next up I have, consider procurement policy. Now, I looked at this and there was nothing redlined or anything. Are we changing it Who has this?
So
We don't have one of those.
we have an existing procurement policy, but it's not as in-depth and detailed as the one that's being proposed. And if you recall, sometime in the fall, late summer of last year, Councilmember Scoot had brought this up, and we were supposed to get back together, and her and I were supposed to look at some revisions. Just simply have not had time to come back on. I have actually since had time to review this policy as prepared. Overall, don't have any problems with it. I do want to add some things to it and maybe make a little bit more clarification purposes. I think this policy was modeled from another locality. It's pretty strict.
Henderson.
It's pretty straightforward to the point. I have reviewed this with our finance officer. We were okay with it in concept.
But this was our policy then?
No,
No.
it was
Oh,
not.
it wasn't? Oh, okay. It makes
This-
it look like it wasn't purchasing.
This was our policy.
Okay.
So my intent would be to spend some time over the next week, and I've got this in a Word document. She sent this to me in a Word document, and actually merge some of our existing language in our existing
Okay.
existing policy to this policy, and also include some other policies that I feel like can fit into here as well.
Okay.
And then have this on the work session for final discussion.
Okay. Anyone objection to that?
I'm just going to stress, this is back in August, you all had approved it, and this, the Henderson, Pinehurst, and I think one other municipality, those three were all in that packet that you all looked at back then. And Henderson seemed to be the easiest, simplest one. So that's the one that's based on.
Okay.
What's the reason for looking at this? What's changed? What's come up? What problems?
That was supposed to go back to my report way back. Just a number of, it's probably a good idea to go back. You know, when I was working on the park, back with Lisa, you know, we never contracted with professional services, purchased anything without getting 3 quotes, like to a crazy degree. Nickel note, remember, because I used to present benches, 3 quotes for benches, 3 quotes for the barn, 3 quotes for everything. And I've noticed that since then, in looking over recent purchases, probably in the last year or so, none of those protocols have really been followed. And then I realized that it's because we did have a purchase policy, but it was not one that I would consider really directive. It didn't help the staff understand exactly what steps they should follow before making a purchase, or the council understand what steps they should make for contracting.
Is there a reason? I mean, I know you haven't been here that long. Chris is here. Is there a reason that we stopped getting multiple bids or whatever's changed?
I have no clue.
I'm not sure specifically which ones, I mean, under certain thresholds, we don't, but we generally try to get multiple bids.
I remember
In most
it-
cases.
A day when Lisa would call me and say, hey, how much would it cost to wire a light bulb? And they had to do a pre-audit. Do we not do pre-audits anymore?
We do pre-audits. What a pre-audit is making sure before you spend the money that there's budget authority to spend that money.
It's not the same
So
as
that's
getting
different
quotes.
than getting quotes.
Okay, I used to have to actually give a quote so that Melody could then get it approved somehow by administrator or you, I don't know who she went to.
No, and we still do that for the most part, I mean, unless it's an emergency situation.
Okay.
We still try to get 3
Yeah, we
bids,
still
3
try.
quotes.
But that's the goal, is to make sure not only it's in here, but it's followed.
Yeah, that it's adopted, and it's laid out somewhere. So, there've been services that we have, professionals even we've contracted with that did not follow any kind of process for engaging them.
Okay.
So you can look at this over the next week and get back to us for a work session.
And I think the recommendations on the front, right? More or less was
Yes.
what I was saying we should do. I think I tried to put it on the front.
Do you need a motion?
Depends if Christina wants one. The motion was more or less for the staff to take it, incorporate other policies they felt they wanted to, look over the parts that were highlighted, and make sure it was something they could administrate.
Yeah, and I'm good. We already have this on. our
I'm
schedule.
good.
Okay. We just think it's consensus that we're all good. You'll just clean up a little bit, you're saying, and have it ready for us at the next work session? That's
Correct.
it? Okay, all right. Anything else on that?
No, but I did have a comment, and I don't know how to fix this. I removed something from the agenda earlier, and I just realized the 2020 contracts.
Oh, yeah. Did you remove that?
I removed it on accident. We can put it back on the agenda for the work session. It's really just a presentation for you all. In the procurement policy that we have now, the purchasing policy, there's a clause in there that says we have to notify you all of contracts that are renewed on a monthly basis within 60 days of the budget. So it's in there. It's your notification. I didn't mean to remove it. We can add it back on the agenda for the work session for y'all to
Does it
discuss.
have to approve it or
No,
adopt
it's
it or
just-
anything like that?
It's just presentation.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Are we okay with the 60 days?
Yeah, I mean, I think the intent was to notify you all. I mean, I think the intent is being met
Okay.
by it being in the agenda.
So there's unanimous consent to have you make necessary or updates to the procurement policy? Everyone's in agreement?
Yeah, and we'll look
Yeah.
at it for final review at the work session to vote on,
Okay.
or put on consent agenda. All right. Next up, I have consider resident proposal for investigation.
Can we take a 1-minute bio?
Okay. Call for a quick bio break.